I built my first scalar healing light chamber in 1978 with material from NASA and the power management equipment and special lights. I built circuit boards and all those Tesla coils and circuit boards and all those kinds of things as a kid. And so understanding the body as that kind of energetic circuitry of light force, life force energy, and understanding working with the DNA, how everything is in our DNA. That's our God code. And the core of the DNA is literally the light.
Dr. Sandra Rose Michael is an innovator in integrative biophysics and natural medicine, best known for inventing the Energy Enhancement System, a technology that combines scalar energy and light to support the body's healing potential. The EESystem has helped countless people heal from chronic and hopeless conditions as a part of her mission to awaken humanity to its full regenerative potential and the lost scientific truths, including Tesla's scalar field principles.
That spinal column is meant to be that standing column of light. That spinal column will allow the power to rise up from within us. You could call that the Kundalini, and that fully raised hood of enlightenment as that energy goes up and activates, opens up the pituitary pineal gland and all those connections. And that's how we access higher consciousness. And this was some of the secrets of Tesla's work, that we have all the receptors for receiving the infinite intelligence. And if you think you can't, you can't. If you know you can, you can. So that's always a truth.
Tesla understood that the human body is an electrical circuit designed to receive infinite intelligence. Dr. Michael has reinvigorated his scalar technology to activate the light at the core of our DNA.
The DNA is our God code, but it carries all, it's a template, it carries all the memories, but it is a scalar. It's that double strand DNA kind of thing, which relates to the scalar field so much.
In this episode, you'll discover the technology behind cellular regeneration and how you can access these principles to heal yourself and even reverse aging.
There's a total neutralization and nullification, that EM null zone, a total nullification of all EMF, ELF, all radiation, all detrimental, destructuring, detrimental fields, totally nullified. But it's a transmutation of energy into beneficial, all this, a full spectrum of hyper healthy, beneficial energy, bioactive energy that the body relates to. So they're doing all kinds of testing in Liechtenstein. They had a woman come and they tested her biological age, not chronological, but biological age when she arrived. It tested as 67 years old. After just 2 overnights, she tested as 34. But the other part of it was her breast cancer. They couldn't find it anymore.
Before we get into this conversation, I want to ask you to join this amazing community of consciousness explorers. This whole idea of pursuing expanded consciousness and the boundaries of human potential while living a modern life is relatively new, which is why we interview revered masters, teachers, experts, and practitioners to help you on your own journey. To stay up to date on the latest conversations, simply click subscribe below and you'll be notified each time a new episode comes out. I am so grateful for all of your support and comments. I love reading them. Now let's dive into this conversation. Hey, Dr. Sandra, how are you?
Well, doing a beautiful day here on the ninth island, we call it, Las Vegas. I'm from Hawaii, so I start everything by saying aloha. So that oneness with the breath and the love of all life. And so we're here to share in that oneness and that honoring of the sacred breath of eternal life, the energy and the power that interconnects all things, animating our hearts, and that fills us with the love that we share, and it flows out infinitely. So that's that infinity wave of love and aloha healing energy that we like to talk about sharing all over the world.
Well, I can feel it through the screen, and I'm so grateful. And you have looks like a fantastic EESystem surrounding you too. So all of that is just amplified, which is amazing. And I'm excited to talk more about the EESystem to a lot of people that I'm not sure if they've ever heard of it before. I know I didn't until probably about 6 months ago, and just to give the listeners a little bit of backdrop before we get into it, I've personally spent over 100 hours using this technology myself. And so I feel very confident in just how amazing it is. And the story is incredible, which is why I wanted to have this discussion. So yeah, it should be a fun conversation. And maybe where we kick this off is how this all started. I know you have such an interesting background, and we could start there.
Okay. Yeah. Everybody asks, where did it all start? And it's kind of a funny story, actually. It all started, my parents met in engineering physics at Ohio State University. Engineering physics. My mother, she was approved as a top secret nuclear physicist, and my dad, aeronautical, electrical, mechanical, structural engineer. And this is early 50s, right? So, and my mother, they had this saying then that guys don't make passes at girls that wear glasses. So she wasn't wearing her glasses, but they were both blind as a bat in one eye and couldn't see out of the other. That was always their joke. And so she thought that my dad was her lab partner. And she was like the only woman in engineering physics anyway. And that's how they met, which is kind of interesting. Where do two, super nerds, I mean, hyper genius nerds go for their honeymoon? It's another kind of funny joke from Ohio. They went to Niagara Falls, of course, because that's Tesla's power plant. Tesla had his power plant at Niagara Falls. So that's where they went for their honeymoon. But here, my mother is a top secret nuclear physicist. Her mother told her if she douched on her wedding night, she wouldn't get pregnant. So that's where it all started.
Sometimes you got to ignore mom's advice. I guess this time it worked out in an unforeseen way.
But it's like, oops, she was. So then she was this mad scientist, kind of stuck on mad. But she was fissioning plutonium in the labs at Battelle Labs, which was all top secret. But she was fissioning plutonium in the lab the whole time she was pregnant with me. And I remembered it all vividly. And so my entire life, I've seen everything as this combination of, of engineering and physics, and understanding the body as a circuitry, understanding everything as, that, well, that, nuclear and quantum physics. I came in past, present, future, all simultaneous for me. So sort of fifth dimensional time. And so it was a little different growing up for me, because I remember as an infant astral projecting to go see whatever I wanted to see, and remembering, Atlantis, and it's funny because I had issues. I came in with issues in that. It's kind of funny, but yeah, I came in. I was, from the time I could talk, I was talking about the mad Atlantean scientists and their abuse of power, and I was still pissed about it. So guess what I got as parents?
Quite the conversation piece for a toddler.
So that's what I got as parents. And as a kid, I had a really hard time. It's like, let me out of here. These people are crazy. God, you didn't tell me about this. And I'd be sent back in. And grew up, though. But it was a real gift, because I grew up doing all of Tesla's experiments, all the top secret government experiments. Because, here my mother was working on the bomb, fissioning plutonium. My dad did the top secret stealth bombers and Mach 3 and stuff like that. And I come in going, how do we heal all of this? How do we bring healing to this world? We don't want another Atlantis on this planet, and so let's create that quantum leap of consciousness and healing, where we can, have a cataclysm of consciousness rather than having the cataclysm of the planet again. So I came in, kind of on a little different thought process than most people. And my whole life has been, how do we bring healing to the world? And so it's kind of frustrating growing up with that kind of awareness. But a lot of gifts to it too, because I grew up with Mensa, and some people don't know what Mensa is, but that's that above top 1% of IQs, right? And so I grew up with all the Mensa brain training, which was a gift. Uh, some of it I didn't appreciate. Some of it was a lot of emphasis on logical thinking. Well, it just seemed kind of boring. It just was so logical. It was ridiculous. Of course, it's obvious, right? Because everything's so logical. I thought, what good is that? Well, then we had COVID. It became very apparent that there was no logic to any of that. When we went through that.
Well, we can certainly agree that logic has its limitations. That's for sure.
Uh-huh. The other gift of it, though, was speed reading. It was in brain entrainment for being able photo reading and things like that. So that was a real gift. And part of what I incorporated into the technology, and that one aspect of it is from that an entrainment of the brain to trigger genius, but also to trigger that ability for photo reading and things like that. Because I didn't like the fact it really upset me when I tested above 99th percentile in ACT and SAT, and I had tested as top in the state of Ohio in Latin, that past life recall stuff, Latin, English, and math. It was the first time anybody was even allowed to take all three, and to have a girl win them was kind of unusual. But when I tested that way, and I was brought in, to the counselor saying, look, this is what you did, I go, oh my gosh, if I'm as smart as it gets on this planet or really close to it, we're really in trouble. What are we going to do? We need to trigger everybody's genius. And so that's been part of my thing, is really focusing on how do we bring healing. And so I started in 1971 in nutrition, chiropractic, reflexology, Ayurveda, studied Sanskrit, and acupressure, and early 70s really dove deep into studying radionics and Rife and bio-photonics and all these things, and built my first scalar healing light chamber in my own spa, because I was in the spa industry, plus I'd been running a power management equipment company. So I took power management equipment. So everything's always been this combination of science and technology and healing and health, and how do we create optimal peak performance and health. And so I built my first scalar healing light chamber in 1978 with material from NASA and the power management equipment and special lights. I studied John Ott's work. People might want to look into that, the study of light and the effects of that. And so incorporated all that. And of course, I'm really a hands-on healer because I see the body as a circuitry, electrical, mechanical, and structural engineering with the physics. All life is energy, and everything's a circuitry. And it's all about coherence in the body, that state where there's no impedance. I built circuit boards and all those, Tesla coils and circuit boards and all those kinds of things as a kid. And so understanding the body as that kind of, energetic circuitry of light force, life force, energy, and understanding, working with the DNA, how everything is in our DNA. That's our God code. And the core of the DNA is literally the light from the stars. We're stardust, we're starlight. And so I created this technology then that literally, because of how it all works, activates the light at the core of the DNA. So that first scalar healing light chamber, it was only one person at a time, so that wasn't enough to bring total healing to the world. But what it worked at is miracles, absolute miracles, because the power that made the body heals the body. That's the principle of straight chiropractic, or like the religion of chiropractic, so to speak. The power that made the body heals the body. So then my work has been about, well, how do we plug the body back into that cosmic light socket? Everything turned back on, everything, raise the voltage, healing is voltage, is a book by Dr. Jerry Tennant. Healing is voltage, helps people understand some of those principles of that. But how do we erase the frequency, the vibration, but also all the right left brain synchronization? I've decades of research in the importance of right left brain synchronization, brain states, all that kind of research, and understanding that opening, that activation of opening up all the neurological, neurotransfer velocity is a good term for when you speed up and open up all those neural pathways so that we can be at full function as, sons and daughters of God, as divine beings. We are infinitely powerful divine beings and bodies of light, really. And if we have access to unlimited power, infinite intelligence, and unconditional love, what's the problem? It's just we have to quit just sitting on the access and access that power. Allows it to allow that power to rise up from within us. That spinal column is meant to be that standing column of light, right? That's that spinal column, and allow the power to rise up from within us. You could call that the Kundalini, and that fully raised hood of enlightenment as that energy goes up and activates, opens up the pituitary, pineal gland, etc., and all those connections. And that's how we access higher consciousness. And this was some of the secrets of Tesla's work, that we have all the receptors for receiving the infinite intelligence. And if you think you can't, you can't. If you know you can, you can. So that's always a truth.
Well, I think a lot of us who are on a consciousness journey know or at least have a glimpse that we can, right? And there's an earnest desire to get back there. And I think what's so interesting about your technology is, for most of us, the way back has been contemplative practice. And there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. I mean, I've contemplative practice has transformed my life, but I haven't really encountered many technologies that mirror some of the things that we've heard about in the ancient times, where people would go into these chambers and they would have healings and they would have awakenings. And what are the pyramids really? Right. And
Yeah,
so
standing column or wave, the pyramids, scalar vortex.
So, the E-System is the first thing I've ever seen where I'm like, whoa, okay, this is a little bit more than like a PEMF mat or some of these other kind of frequency-based things. And so maybe just to ground, before we go a little bit deeper, like, can you describe what the E-System is today so that people listening can kind of wrap their head around some of the things we're talking about?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to, yes, all the meditational states, and ask and you shall receive is a law. So the clearer your question, the clearer your answers. I was meditating and going, okay, God, how do we create, the next quantum leap of consciousness on the planet? We need some help here, because everybody's being bombarded 24/7, the EMF, the ELF, the radiation, the microwave, and it keeps people stuck in fright, flight, or fight, or, you're sympathetic versus parasympathetic, that point of balance, that dynamic homeostasis, which the body is always struck wanting to be in. But as long as there's imbalance and people are being, taking all your energy just to cope, that's what happens when there's right or left brain dominance. The domination issues, and then constant compensation for imbalance is struggle. So then it takes all our energy just to cope with what's been considered a hostile environment. And when we're being bombarded 24/7, everybody on the planet right now, it's like we're living in a microwave. Everybody's dealing with extreme radiation poisoning, besides what RFK, Bobby's been talking about, all the toxins in the air, the food, the water. Let's make America, let's make the world healthy again. I can, because we're living in a toxic soup, of all these poisons, these toxins, endocrine disruptors, the gender bender chemicals, and all these things. So it's like, okay, God, what do we do? How do we help people make it through into accelerated evolution? EESystem, it stands for Energy Enhancement System, but the other thing it stands for is accelerated evolution. So how do we create an ideal energetic optimal environment that allows the millivoltage, the voltage of the cells, to increase, to give the body the energy to heal itself? Because the body, when it has the right hyper healthy energetic environment, has the right energy, it wants to heal anything and everything. Also, it synchronizes the right and left brain hemispheres very, very dynamically, very quickly, elegantly, effortlessly. It's creating that right left brain synchronization, which then allows people to have their ideal optimal meditational states and know whatever God wants them to know. Where, be still and know is the biblical piece, but it was really shut up and listen. The clearer your questions, the clearer the answers. Now let that come in. And where the only brain stays where we can do true healing or regeneration, where we're activating and repairing our generational traumas and literally repairing of the DNA and the repairing of our organs, that only happens when you're in delta and theta brain states. So that's why it's so important to get out of the being stressed out with all the stressors, that constant compensation for all this imbalance, to be able to go, and relax back into yourself, where you have all the energy. It's also been called the tachyon energy. You have access to that infinite energy and power that created us, to tap back in and know that we have all the energy, to respond to any and every stressor appropriately, really. To relax into that place of power and allow that power, to be aligned, for us to be aligned. I created a process called the alignment process, but it's where we spoke a little bit about this prior to the show, how we're being aligned by the light, with the light, and as the light and highest powers of love here on earth, as is in heaven, through us now. So that's the underlying principle of the EE system. And it's generating fields of consciousness. But I was told that, there was all this hijacking of our DNA. So if you see the EE system, I don't know if you can see it on the screen behind me, but it looks like 12 strands of DNA on the screen, because we need to activate and mobilize our body's stem cells, but also put all of the DNA, allow all the DNA to be reminded in all of our systems, all of our correlations of our systems, our chakras, and all of our organs, to be reminded of the original divine blueprint, the original divine design. We have designer genes. Literally designer genes. So we want to put those designer genes back on, get them turned back on, and literally regeneration, where some of the research found that it was actually repairing all the breaks in the DNA, and lengthening the telomeres. And that's been some of the research that has proven that. So it's the true age reversal.
Let's talk about bringing your whole self to work. If you're like many executives, including myself at one point, you might be living a double life. You have your personal career, and then you have your personal growth journey. Conscious Talent is changing that as the world's first executive talent firm specializing in connecting leaders and companies who embrace inner work. Imagine finding job opportunities where your contemplative practice, latest retreat experience, and commitment to your personal evolution are seen as strengths, not secrets. What if you actually felt like your career supported this aspect of your life versus competed with it? Conscious Talent is building a community of leaders and companies who are committed to both combining professional excellence with personal transformation. If you're ready to merge your two worlds with a fully aligned career, join the movement at conscioustalent.com. Here you can sign up for our talent collective to stay on top of future opportunities, or find your next transformative team member.
It's incredible stuff. And maybe you could talk to just some of the conditions that people have been able to fully heal or cure by simply, immersing themselves in,
Of course,
an EE
it's
system.
illegal to cure anything.
We can say it on this podcast.
But I do like to talk about total reversals, total regeneration. I mean, we've seen anything and everything heal because the power that made the body heals the body. And when the body has the right energy, it wants to heal anything and everything. Now, even from that first healing, scalar healing light chamber that I had in my spa in 1978, we saw reversals of cancers. We saw reversals of leukemia, lupus, and things like that. Also, some of what's been proven very, very critical is specifically designed to activate the vitamin D levels in the body. And now you've learned through COVID how important the vitamin D levels. We've had people just from using the system, their vitamin D levels increased in their testing, things like that. But it literally gives the body the energy to heal anything and everything. I'll tell you one of my recent ones. This is a call I just had this last week from Liechtenstein, where we've got a 108 unit system.
Whoa, that's a big one.
Yeah, and really interesting. And they've proven how, even in that system, it is a true 0-point energy. There's a total neutralization and nullification, that EM null zone, a total nullification of all EMF, ELF, all radiation, all detrimental, destructive, destructuring, detrimental fields, totally nullified. But it's a transmutation of energy into, beneficial, all this, a full spectrum of hyper healthy, beneficial energy, bioactive energy that the body relates to. So they're doing all kinds of testing in Liechtenstein. They had a woman come and they tested her biological age, not chronological, but biological age when she arrived. It tested as 67 years old. After just two overnights, she tested as 34.
Whoa.
We'd rather grow younger than older. An ideal, optimal, energetic environment. But he goes, it wasn't so great. It was only 10 years on the second night, because she went from 67 to 47 in the one overnight, which we call the scalar slumber party, sleeping in the system. And this is not one person at a time like my first system. They have, I don't even know how many chairs and beds they have in theirs in Liechtenstein. But she did the overnight, and she went from 67 to 44. And he goes, she only got 10 years younger with the second overnight. I said, well, 10 years younger in one night, that's not bad. That's pretty cool. But the other part of it was her breast cancer. They couldn't find it anymore. And that's what I love to hear. They just can't find it anymore. What we've heard a lot is it must have been a misdiagnosis.
Well, the traditional medical system has to explain it away somehow to justify their jobs. A question that I have is, you don't often hear, the DNA. To me, that's so interesting, because I've heard a lot about in my consciousness journey about how we have this kind of latent DNA that becomes activated as we go through our own evolution. And you certainly don't ever hear much about DNA being repaired in modern health. And so can you talk just a little bit broadly speaking, kind of how to think about the DNA's role in our physical healing, our evolution, and then specifically the mechanism that the EE system works on to kind of turn this back on?
Oh gosh, we could talk for days on it, I think, but that's pretty broad. Yeah, the DNA is our God code. but it carries all, it's a template. It carries all the memories. But it is a scalar. It's that double strand of DNA kind of thing, which relates to the scalar field so much. And that's why it's such a dynamic, because we are transdimensional beings, really, through our DNA. And cellular memory is also there, but it carries all the memories of this life, past lives, and genetically, of every experience we've ever been through. So it carries the codes of remembrance also. But talking about it on a more of some of the scientific level, is our technology creates like a photonic fusion, and the DNA is bio-photonic. In that, Fritz Albert Popp's work was talking about the prime function of DNA is the storage of photons. Well, what are photons? Those are your quantums of light, or what I like to call your light force energy, quantums of light. And so cancer is, it's a disturbance in the force, so to speak. There's that distortion of the fields. There's a breakdown of the fields. Radiation unzips the DNA. So unified fields puts the DNA back into its original coil, so to speak, like a Tesla coil, but puts it back into its original divine design. And then we're doing something called photonic fusion. With that, there's a hydrobifurcation that occurs, and it releases the active oxygen in the system, just like we have with Otto Warburg's work. Otto Warburg showed that cancer can exist in an oxygenated system. Cancer only exists whether it's hypoxic, or and where the tissues have been acidified. So pH, alkalinize or die. The pH is your hydrogen potential. So in the hydrobifurcation, you're releasing the active oxygen, so you can wear a pulse oximeter in the room. You'll find oxygen levels on people go to optimal levels, because it's releasing the active oxygen. So you've got your ultimate oxygen therapy, and all you're doing is breathing, but you're literally breathing light, photons, quantums of light, and energy. So you're oxygenated, fully oxygenated, and the oxygenation of the brain is so good. So it's antidepressant effects, just even opening up the oxygenation of the brain, because with the radiation issues, it ionizes the brain and oxidizes, so that creates a reduction. But the radiation unzips the DNA, thus putting it back together. But then there's the release also of that active hydrogen, pH, hydrogen potential, right? And so the active hydrogen can repair the covalent hydrogen bonds in the DNA itself, besides creating that power of hydrogen to alkalinize all the tissues of the body back to their proper pH, because that's that acidification of the tissues. And so we've seen tons of reversals where they just can't find the cancer anymore. And you have to quit feeding the cancer. That is part of it. Want to trigger people's genius, so that when you have the energy, you can change your mind, change your thoughts, change your mind, but change the diet. But you have to have the energy to change your diet, change your relationships, change your life, be able to meditate, because people have been so bombarded, they haven't been able to get into those deep meditational states. So in an EESystem, the actual research, and this was, there's a whole 350 person meditation study, but there was actual research with the top brain researcher from the Pentagon. We did fun research with him, but found we could go to a deeper meditational state than a Tibetan monk in 7 minutes. So speed meditating and the decalcification of the pineal gland, you can drop into those ideal optimal meditational states where you can know whatever there is to know, the knowing of which that allows all things to heal and clear in the body. So you're fully oxygenated, alkaline state. It's hyper healthy energy, bioactive energy the body relates to. And then I also worked with another physicist, Panos Pappas, out of Greece. He invented something called the PAPIMI machine, Panos Pappas. And he found that and proved this in the scientific community that what occurs in the cells is actually cold fusion. So that's why the body relates so much to the cold nuclear fusion type event that we're creating with the photonic fusion with the scalar, right? So the body relates to that as its natural state. When I lectured for the Royal Society of Medicine in London, quadrupled mitochondrial activity in 1 hour in an EESystem. So that's really cool stuff as far as to understand more of some of the mechanisms of action of how the technology might work, even though all anybody does is go into the system, you experience it, you know, the whole body goes, oh, I can finally freaking relax because you're not being bombarded. And the body then wants to go to where it can repair, rejuvenate, regenerate, wants to drop into those natural native states of consciousness. And people take a power nap because I tell people to say all their prayers while you're breathing light to every cell and every particle and every tissue of your being. Thank your whole body for being so magnificent. Thank yourself for being so magnificent, but thank your body for going through everything it's gone through for you. You know, everything it's been subjected to. Thank it and relax, you know, say all the prayers and take that power nap, because the real healing is in dropping into those deep states, delta and theta brain states, because that's where things can repair, rejuvenate, regeneration. When the eyes are open, more than 80% of the body's energy is being externalized. So we don't want people going into a system, although it's the safest place to use a cell phone because there's a total nullification of detrimental fields, or your laptops or whatever. But you don't want to be distracted from your own healing, or to distract anybody else who's in there from their healing. So you want to close your eyes and take full advantage of being in a system. Well, you get your money's worth. Effectiveness, right? You get your money's worth. So you want to close your eyes and go as deep as you can, so the body can, rather than externalizing energy, it can internalize the energy and use the energy to heal, repair, rejuvenate, regenerate. And where there's this little, literally like rebooting a computer, defrag, put everything back in coherence, but it's also like a reset, a reboot, where you're going from fright, flight, or fight, the sympathetic to parasympathetic, that dynamic homeostasis, you know, where everything wants to be in balance. And so resetting everything to that state where you're functioning more from parasympathetic, where you have all the energy to respond to all the stressors without getting stressed out. So that literal reboot, like defragging a computer, like like reset, or or it could be compared to your cell phone. Okay, this is like a whole body wireless cell charger, like you're recharging your cell phone, but wireless transmission, which is a lot of what Tesla talked about, right? You're recharging every cell of the body, but just like your cell phone, if you're still talking on it, it doesn't recharge as efficiently as if you put it down and let it recharge, or if you reboot it so it goes into greater coherence, and then it can function more optimally. Same thing with us. You want to use the energy. Scalar is continual reorganization to higher levels of function. It's cumulative, is fifth dimensional, beyond relative time and space. That's, you know, so it's cumulative. Each time you go in, the body takes the energy and reorganizes to higher levels of function. And you can never be too functional. This is real functional medicine.
You know, just on that note, I had a question, because I told you I've hit about 100 hours in the system, and I'm like, well, if I don't do it for a while, you know, you just kind of put that traditional exercise paradigm on top of something like this and think, oh, if I don't go to the gym for a couple of weeks, like I'm going to start to get a little flabby, right? And so does the change in our cells and our structure, it sounds like you're saying it persists regardless if you decide to keep going or not. Like this is like a beyond space-time change.
Yeah, how long does infinity last? People, it wants to keep going. Of course, you cannot expect to get healthier living in a microwave if we're being bombarded 24/7. So it's not like you're going to get healthier in that environment. And so it's cumulative though. Every time you get in, the body picks up where it left off and wants to maintain. But that's also why we recommend the medallions. Medallions, where's the other one? Medallions and bracelets. Yes. You've
I'm
got a
rocking one.
lapis lazuli is what you have, Scott. This is actually a blue tiger's eye or hawk's eye. I like that. So the medallions really help maintain the field so that you maintain the benefits much easier. And it wants to remind the body to stay in, reminds the red blood cells to stay in integrity, reminds the DNA to stay in integrity, reminds the whole body of that standing columnar wave. You can see it's the tube torus shape. The secret of the universe is that is that scalar vortex or the standing columnar wave, this torsion field. And it reminds everything to stay in balance and also creates like a cocoon, energetic cocoon, where you want to stay strong and stay in integrity no matter what we're exposed to, no matter what. Let's stay in that integrity and remembrance of who we are, all that we're here for, and all that we have access to. You want to remind every part of you to stay in that integrity. So the medallions are very, 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 very good way to carry a piece of the technology with you wherever you go, very cost effective. And miracles with the medallions have been reported all over the world for more than 2 decades. They're very effective. They work. And I don't know if you saw the research. It's on our website. It's on EESystem.com. But Dr. Glenn Ryan did some of the research with the medallions. He did DNA research itself with the medallion and in the lab, found a 28% reduction of, 28% increase in the electrical conductivity of human DNA. So if you can imagine, that's all your cell signaling and all the communication in the body. It's like going from old copper wiring to platinum, where everything's accelerated in that neurotransfer velocity, where all the neurons are firing coherence. That's a state where there's no impedance. So you're clearing the circuit jams. So, but he also did more recent research. Everybody's heard how good crystals are. So he did studies with the same crystal uncharged and found a 2% improvement in, crystals are good, 2% improvement in the benefit to the body in the study, just using a crystal. But when you put the crystal, I tell everybody, bring anything and everything into the system.
I have a crazy story for you about this, by the way.
Yeah, people come in with their roll bags of crystals and supplements and water. Anything. He found that the crystal that was put in the system had a 20% improvement on the effects in the body.
So let me tell you this story. So I had to take a call for a meditation course that I'm taking at the center here in Naples at my mom's house. And how, I don't know if you have a Mac, but there's like that touch bar on the top of the keyboard that allows you to change the volume and change the light screen and all these things. And it's kind of like an LED. And the night I brought, and that thing has been broken for months. And I was living in Costa Rica to escape a lot of the environmental toxins that you were describing, and hadn't gotten a chance to go to a Mac store to fix it. And after having my laptop in my bag that night in the center, the touch bar started working again. And I was just like, holy shit, like this is crazy. This is crazy. And I know this isn't a coincidence. And
not a coincidence. I've had cell phones that were dropped in the pool or whatever. I mean, put them in the middle of the system and they work again. It's designed to help anything and everything work better. Efficiency, effectiveness is a measure of truth, but it's designed to help make anything and everything work better. But that's cool, right? So it's great. It's all about coherence and energy transfer. Everything is energy. So it reminded it how to function again. Put it back. Okay, the electrical matrix went back where it belonged. Now it's going to behave. You know, so they found 20% improvement just putting things in the system. So I tell people to bring their supplements in. We've done lots of research. Since I developed this technology, the first full system was 1997, 96, 97, really. So we've done research ever since. But so your supplements and things. But I also tell people to bring their medications in. Let's make them more biocompatible because it's changing how the spin is, the vortexing. It's also changing the hydrogen atoms. And there's lots of ways I've demonstrated that. Last night I was demonstrating with one of our bracelets with a bottle of, with a glass of wine. but you can hold a bracelet to a glass of wine or water or sparkling water and hold it up. And you can feel when it gets heavier, the density actually changes, but the specific weight changes. And that's the effect of the positive aspects of heavy hydrogen. So you have like a hydrogen water, but it gets heavier. So play with this. These medallions are, the bracelets, the blood runs through it, but they're very, very handy. But we were playing with that, with sparkling water or with champagne. You can hold it that way again, it'll change, and the nose changes. It's reducing the surface tension, right? So the bubbles get smoother and faster. Everything's smoother. It opens up the nose. But you can literally watch the bubbles get smoother and faster if you have champagne or sparkling water. With red wine, it opens up that nose and it makes all the resveratrol, pycnogenols, phytonutrients work, makes it healing substance. And people test that out all the time because you can't ever get a hangover in an EE system because you're oxygenated and hydrated and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, so they did testing too. Then our new hypercharger had a 51% improvement in the effects on the body. Yeah, 51%, and that's why the medallions are super effective. We hear all kinds of crazy miracles with that. I mean, and we love miracles, the blind seeing, the lame walking, the deaf hearing, and I get them every day from all over the world. And the the ones that the autistic kids that they're speaking again, and things like that. And that's what I live for. I was just, you know,
It's beautiful stuff. And one of the questions I had for you is I heard you talk about how the body is like a condensation of consciousness. And that really resonates with me because a lot of as I've gone on my own kind of healing consciousness journey, it's just become very obvious that this body is kind of an intimate communication mechanism for all the things in our consciousness that are ready to come up and be seen and healed. And, it's really kind of this evolutionary mechanism for us to become aware of these things, through discomfort, through pain, through illness. And for a lot of these psychosomatic conditions,
everything is really psychosomatic. The body is a condensation of consciousness. It holds the memories, like we talked about, every thought, experience, situation, but shows you where you bought into the lies. And it's the truth that sets us free. And as soon as the secrets of instant healing as a kahuna, right? And that I programmed into the technology is that as soon as you get the message from higher self, what something's about, no more need for the symptom. That's why I talk about using the energy to turn up the volume on your own inner knowing, to let yourself know whatever there is to know that allows everything to heal and clear, right?
so this is kind of getting to my question, which is like in the EE system for these psychosomatic conditions, are things needed to be brought into awareness and the EE system makes that easier for that type of instant healing? Or can you actually just completely skip that step because the information is being delivered to the cells in a way that's different from the communication from the higher self?
Right. Well, the way to the higher self is through the unconscious, subconscious mind, which is the body. So sometimes there needs to be a conscious awareness, and other times there doesn't. Uh, this excites the cells of the body. It's bringing light. It's what I like to call cellular enlightenment. And the body being that condensation of consciousness, I had developed for listening to thousands of bodies something called the body map of how thoughts have been stored in the body. And so you have the lower thought, like for example, guilt, and the higher thought that allows it all to clear, instant release, instant healing. The higher thought from guilt is gratitude, for example. So, there's a body map of thoughts. We can send it to you. You can access it. It's very useful, very, very useful, because the body's a continual monitoring device. But it's also when the body has more energy, the first thing it wants to do is clean house. And behind the toxins, the physical toxins, is the toxic emotional garbage. And everything's either emotional and or spiritual. It really all goes back to a spiritual disconnect where you forgot who you really are, essentially. Fear is only forgetfulness of who we really are. If God is all there is, if love is all there is, what would there ever be to be afraid of? But the only way things got stuck in the body, that oneness with the breath of life, right? The breath of life. But the only way anything got stuck in the body was the holding pattern was created by that holding of the breath. Don't want to be here, don't want to deal with it. God screwed up, something's wrong. And to let that go. So when you breathe, when the body has more energy, it has more charge, then it wants to discharge everything that does not belong. And so that discharge, sometimes people have a retracing, like a Herxheimer effect, but a retracing of old symptoms as the
I
body's
had that.
pushing out what created it. Like a herpes, for example, they might get a big herpes outbreak. That's why it's so important to do the salt bath afterwards to work with the charge in the body, but also to pull those things right out of the body. That's the world's easiest detox. Nothing does what a bath does because the skin's the largest organ of elimination. But it's also the emotional behind the physical toxicity is that emotional toxicity and a divine opportunity to breathe love into those parts of self, because as soon as you're present with any and every part of yourself, as soon as you're present with those parts with love, it all heals, it all clears, because love is our higher power. God is love, and breathing all God's love back into ourself. And so in that discharge, that release of charge, it's it's like taking out the garbage. You got a whole gestalt of things connected to whatever part of the body, of a whole gestalt of how many life experiences, lifetimes of experiences. Whether you believe in past lives or not, there have been a lot of past lives on the planet, and it's all in our DNA. So you got all this accumulative, generational trauma, etc., that's been stored. If you can breathe into it, you can let it go. You don't have to stop and sort and analyze it on its way out. If you recognize anything on its way out, it's like taking out the garbage. You don't have to stop and sort and recognize, oh, this was from my meal 3 days ago. Yuck. Just let it go. Just take out the garbage. You have to go back. Oh, this was from my great grandmother's, she was part of the Holocaust or something. Divine opportunity to let go of anything and everything that no longer serves our highest purpose in being here. So part of the intentionality with the EE system is to call forth all the wisdom of all that experience. Now, what do we want to create? This has been a very, very creative planet. Now let's call forth all the wisdom of all those experiences, grateful for all of them, because now we wouldn't be able to fulfill all of our highest purposes if we hadn't had all those experiences. That makes us very experienced. And you have to have done things to the max to be able to be a true master of something. You have to know things intimately to be able to be a true master of it. So grateful for all of it. Whatever it's taken for you to learn and grow is great, because that supports your being the greatness of who you really are as a divine Christed being, to walk the planet in full sacred sovereignty of your light, your life, you wouldn't have your highest purpose, your greatest vision, your greatest mission if you weren't here to get it done. And get her done now, okay? No
Everyone
excuses.
out there who's getting their ass kicked right now, this is what we need to hear, right? And I've been going through that experience of having a somewhat of a little bit of a dark night, and
It's a dark night of the soul on the planet. We're in very, very deep shift as a planet. So everybody's got their hip boots on and got their shovels. We're it's
yeah,
the
it feels like
turning of
that.
the ages, this karmic clearinghouse of garbage, and so much being exposed, disclosed, being brought to light. All this darkness, the dark secrets being brought to light, and bringing out those dark secrets, because the secrets come from the word sacred. And so it's about letting go of all desecration of our bodies and our beings so that we can come into full remembrance of the sacredness of our bodies and who we are and all that we are and all that we're here for. So we can live our greatest life, our greatest love, and new heaven, new earth through us. We have to focus on what we want now, not keep wallowing in all the dysfunctional. There's a destructuring for the restructuring. And we're the future that cannot be stopped. Nothing can stop what is coming. Or what I've heard from my guidance for decades is the Great Awakening cannot and will not be stopped. So that's what we're here for. It's the most exciting time on the planet, this turning of the ages, unprecedented time as we're going into the golden age of enlightenment. According to the Vedic astrologers, we've now officially moved from Kali Yuga going into Satya Yuga, the golden age, or the age of Aquarius. Pluto went into Aquarius, and the darkness is being brought to light. So get excited about it all. We've waited a long time for this time on the planet, and new heaven, new earth. It's time for us to walk the planet as the fully realized God, goddess beings. Yeah, the Christed beings. Second coming is we remember who we are. We're the ones we've been waiting for. It's time to show up.
It is time to show up, and I'm curious to get your perspective on this. Like, I know there's a lot of us out there that have been on this consciousness journey and have seen that we're in the midst of this shift, and it's hard. It's very hard for someone who's kind of been fighting it for a while, right? Like, I think we talked a little bit about that before the show. Like, you're getting your licks being out there physically, energetically, emotionally.
When you're on the front line of God's army, you take the hits from the dark
Yeah,
minions. But at the same
exactly.
time, my guides would always say this. I mean, my guides were funny, my higher guidance. It's just as easy to say it's easy as it is to say it's hard. How do you want it to be? There's nothing bigger than God.
Yeah, I guess I was going to ask you kind of like what advice as someone who literally remembers, phases like this before on the planet, in earlier times in history, what advice would you have for someone who's feeling like the intensity of what's going on right now in their
Yeah,
system?
and it's very, very intense. It's like the spiritual battle. The Luciferic contracts are up. The Luciferic control on the planet by the dark minions. The gig's up. The contracts are up. But it's a difficult time because it is a spiritual battle. Because they pulled out all the, they're desperate. They're like cornered rats, and they're desperate and doing anything and everything they can on their way out, even though they know they've lost. So it's a very intense time. And so we're all being called. We will be tested, right? What does unconditional love means letting go of every freaking excuse you've ever had for not being in love and staying in love. And can you love this? And if God is all there is, if love is, what is there not to love? So unconditional love, you will be tested. Letting go of every freaking excuse we've ever had for not staying in love. God is love. Awareness is our power, but love is our superpower. and being able to be present with anything and everything with love, no matter what. So we're being called. We will be tested. It's like honing that sword of truth, trial by fire. We're going through the intensity of the battle, so to speak. And it's the truth that sets us free. And we're being called. Are you going to stand in your power, in your light, in your love? No excuses. Can you carry that sword of truth, that sort of like, can you put on the armor of God and that total remembering that embodiment of who we really are and who we're called to be on this planet, why we're here. What if we could really be here in the fulfillment of all of our higher purposes? No more excuses.
That
You got to
hits.
get off the yeah buts and access your power.
A question I did have for you is, we talked about a little bit about earlier about DNA and how certain DNA activations are associated with spiritual gifts and just innate capacities that we all have that remain dormant. Have you seen, I know there's been an incredible amount of healing stories and miracle stories on EESystem, and I want to make sure that all of those are linked out in the show notes for anybody to watch them for themselves. Like, you can't make this stuff up. There's literal people telling about their own stories. But what about the activation of certain spiritual gifts by spending extended periods of time in the system? Is that something that you've seen?
Over and over and over. And that's really more of what it's, we're talking spiritual science, An example, last weekend, I was up in Reno, and there's a boy, Trevor, and his mom and him wrote a book. He was a nonverbal, he's a speller, but nonverbal, and using the system. And I think the book's called Beyond What Meets the Eye. Beyond What Meets the Eye, by Laura Hirsch, Hirsch. And so I was just with her. And there's a whole chapter in the book of how his intuition and psychic abilities developed using our technology. And now he's communicating, and he was just tested with mind reading capabilities where she could think a 7-digit number and he can name it off. She could think about a song and he can name it. And spell it. And he's singing and he's playing piano and he's like, it's all this amazing stuff. She's getting ready to bring more of that out. But we have so many stories like that. But I love what it's doing for some of these kids. And it's so, so important to, we've seen absolute total miracles over and over and over again with the kids that have been vaccine damage or autism. Our peer-reviewed published study out of University of Hawaii Medical School, for example, is one of my favorite stories. We had a little girl, it was a clear case of vaccine damage. She was having 8 to 10 grand mal seizures every single day after her well baby check, right? And she was now 3.5, and so had been going on since she was 1.5, 2 years, 8 to 10 grand mal seizures every single day. They'd tried everything, including buying their own hyperbaric chamber and all these things. And bottom line is she had her first seizure-free day after her third 1-hour session in the EESystem at University of Hawaii Medical School. And so, and a little girl less than 4 years old can't fake not having grand mal seizures. But for the mother to call me up and say, thank you so much. My daughter smiled at me for the first time in years. But that finally got written up in the Journal of Neurology Research. Could not mention that it was vaccine damage or autism. It was written up as mitigation of seizure disorder with scalar therapy. Mitigation of seizure disorder, because it would have never, ever been published if you mentioned the other issues. So I'm hoping that's all going to change with, Robert Kennedy and Make America Healthy Again, and bringing out the environmental effects of, it's up to 1 in 12.5 boys in California now have autism.
Yeah, it's insane.
It's insane. Or the average nationwide, I think, is 1 in 31 kids with autism.
But you're crazy if you question it. It's a bizarre
Safe and
thing. And
effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. I mean, just, but there were no testing. He's proven that. He's written the books. Of course, they were granted 100% immunity. So this is what again needs brought out, needs exposed, and people need to stand up. You know, but imagine what a parent would go through with these issues. Imagine 8 to 10 grand mal, flat out grand mal seizures a day. These are lives being destroyed. I mean,
well, I personally had struggled with my health immensely after getting the COVID vaccine, like multiple years of illness. And
that
so
was a wake up.
I know firsthand, well, that was a huge part of my awakening. And so I know firsthand it was very binary. One day you were great, the next day you were not, and it just
Oh, but it
continued.
couldn't
And
have been
so
that. It's safe and effective.
I know. And
The
so,
gaslighting.
I can't even imagine as a father, like the level of pain and suffering that I've personally experienced because of that, and because of the decision that I made, that I've had to learn how to forgive and love
Forgive
myself and
yourself.
all of these things. Forgive my mother who pushed it on me. Forgive all of these things was incredibly difficult. And to now as a father to think about, you know, injuring my child, and the pain that must cause, it's unthinkable.
This is part of why I was requested, we'll say in meditation, instructed, requested, assigned, given the assignment to create this technology, to repair all that damage and bring everything back into remembrance of our divine design. So we've seen just tremendous, tremendous reversals of the damages that have been done. But that's also where that salt bath becomes vitally important. That detox salt bath. Have you did that after being in the system?
I've done it a lot. And I have questions about it because I think the whole detoxification thing, it's a big thing amongst my peers and society. Like half my friends have saunas and they're doing all of these things, but we're kind of you're charging the cells and then doing the detox, right? In the bath, which is quite different. And so I'd love for you to talk about kind of how this approach to detoxification is a little bit more is different than people just going and sitting in the sauna, which I think is what 90% of the people who are detoxing are doing.
Which is great. That's a great piece. Far infrared sauna, etc., is some of the things I do recommend. But nothing does what a bath does. And again, it's back to the old science from the healing temples, all the way back, the purification rites, because but it goes back to also my basic anatomy physiology 101. The skin is the largest organ of elimination. It's the third kidneys, so it's a way to take all the stress off the kidneys, but also how our immune system works. As you raise basic body temperature, it kicks up our immune function, immune system. So you want a nice hot bath, to open up the pores, open up the capillaries. But then that salt is the old purifier, and it's 2 cups of salt, sea salt, Himalayan salt, salt, not Epsom salt, because that's magnesium sulfate. So it's a little different. Everybody's so magnesium deficient, it'll pull all the toxins in the water into the body if you just do an Epsom salt bath. The magnesium's relaxing, but it's pulling in. There's so much garbage in our water supply besides the fluoride, which thank God RFK is getting it. A couple states are banning it, Florida, and getting the fluoride out. But get the fluoride, but there's chlorine, but there's everybody's chemo drugs and hormone drugs and all these different things that are in our water supply. And so you don't want to pull that in. That's why the salt pulls it out. The salt's a negative charge, the toxins are a positive charge, so it pulls it out. The bath for radiation is 2 cups salt, 2 cups baking soda. Okay. So that's a bath for radiation. And the way that, and another way that you increase that is add 1 cup to 2 cups of borax to the water. But 1 cup, 20 borax is boron. It's a boron deposit. But it's one of the number one things for, again, pulling the acidity and the radiation out of the tissues. But also, it's one of the number one things for detoxifying the pineal gland, sending the calcium back to the bones, things like that. But the boron is unique in that it neutralizes a lot of the synthetic biologies, the nanobots and
Things people probably don't know about that listen to this podcast, but
yeah,
there's interesting evidence out there, that's for
luciferase,
sure.
things like that. But that says 2 cups salt, 2 cups baking soda, and a cup of borax is the bath I recommend. And breathing, let everything dissolve into the water. Nice hot bath. Now, if you want to do the sauna before the bath, open everything up, penetrate, then get in the bath. That's a good way to use the sauna. But that bath, and then when Fukushima happened, we actually started hypercharging the salt. And so that's our EE salt. So you can add some of that or use it straight, that mix. And it has clay and green tea and things for working with the radiation and the DNA and ginger. So very, very good detox bath. So that becomes vital. Yeah, but but it's kind of interesting. I work a lot with the special forces and you know a lot of the military and all their exposures and things, right? So I had one of my special ops, special forces guys. I had told him to do this, and he took a black light. Like some people have these things where you can go and you can see fluids in a hotel room, because they'll light up and stuff, and you see it under a black light. Well, you can take that. I told him to look at his bath water after being in the system. And people see it turns gray or this or that, or the heavy metals. Sometimes you can pick those up with a magnet because it'll feel like steel shavings or something in the bottom of the of the tub. I mean, it's really, sometimes you see the parasites in the water. But with that black light, he said it was the scariest shit he's ever seen in his entire life. He didn't recommend anybody do it because you could see all these parasites glowing and moving in the water. So
Jeez.
yeah,
Well, what's
luciferays and these nanobots, and but
just to comment on that,
but
my
really
wife,
important after that jab.
yeah, for sure. One of the things my wife I've noticed is that I don't often wear deodorant because our deodorant is so toxic.
Right.
And just all the bathroom products, I just really kind of try to be as close to as if I'm like
Don't
bathing in
put
a
anything
stream.
on the skin that you wouldn't eat, because whatever you put on the skin is in the bloodstream. And that's part of how they got us, all the poisoning. They got you to pay to poison yourself. Brilliant.
Well, what I was going to say is my wife's like, I don't smell anymore. Since I've been doing this, like my body odor has changed dramatically, which is, I guess, as a result of the detoxification.
Yeah.
So I can
That's
vouch
how we're
for it.
supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Healthy.
No kidding.
No, but that's great, right? Isn't that great? But
Yeah,
you
it
want
is.
to breathe, let everything dissolve into the water, including the emotional things. Breathe. Let everything dissolve into the water. Stay in that tub a half hour or so. Or you can, if it gets too hot, get out, get back in. It'll pump another level or layer of stuff out. Let everything dissolve into the water, let it go down the drain, and say aloha.
I love it. Two more questions I have for you. The first is with a lot of different technologies, like for example, like a Rife machine or some of these other things, there's this idea that okay, the changes are going to take some time, like after you do the treatment. And can the same be said with the E system, where it's like are the changes isolated to when we're in the system, or it's like the body's in a prime state now, it's kind of doing its thing even after we're in the system?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It wants to keep on going. So healing is a process, and the body will do anything and everything it can while it can, and to trust the infinite innate intelligence of the body. Sometimes there'll be a retracing of symptoms. Thank your body for letting go of what or doing whatever it takes to heal and function perfectly. Don't stop the detox symptoms. Don't take a painkiller as the body's trying to push out whatever created the pain in the first place. You may re-experience it. That's the time to breathe, get back in that bathtub, get in the sauna, get in the bathtub. Let that stuff go. But support the body in what it's trying to do and not stop the body's infinite innate intelligence, because it knows how to heal itself, and it's cumulative. Now, we have crazy miracles where, like I said, in 2 nights, the cancer is gone. And we hear this where it's gone from the size of a grapefruit to a golf ball in one overnight, things like that. We have all kinds of where people that have been blind all of a sudden can see again, or people that have been deaf for 40 years all of a sudden can hear again. I mean, we get all kinds of crazy miracles and we love it. And some of them are very rapid. But primarily, the body, it takes, give it enough time to heal. It's not like you're going to reverse 70 years of garbage in 1 hour or 2 hour session. This isn't a quick fix per se, even though a lot of people have those kinds of miracles. But no, you want to, how healthy do you want to be? Do you want to keep getting healthier? You can't ever be too healthy. So you want to give the body the energy to continue getting healthy. You don't want to just let go of some symptoms. Why not be the best you can possibly be? Ideally, the best is sleeping in it. Ideally, every home should have one. The best is having it around the bed. Like Tony Robbins has 24 units around his bed. So does Scott McKay.
Well, I'm working on my wife, trying to get her. I don't know if she likes all the bright lights, but yeah, I mean, that's what I've been doing is the overnights. And I actually think it works really nice because you don't have to add another thing on your schedule. You're just going to sleep,
You just go to
and
bed, which is where the body is supposed to be healing and detoxing the brain and all that. And being, yeah, so the best is having it around the bed, or the magic is in doing the overnights, the scalar slumber party. But you didn't have any trouble sleeping in there, right?
no, I found so long as I had eye mask and earplugs, like I was good.
So you're not hearing other people snore.
Well, thankfully, the one I've been going to is kind of a solo setup. And it's just funny that I'm just the many nights where I'm like, man, I'm sleeping in a retail shopping center in the middle of South Florida to get healthy. What a world we live in, huh? Um, but so
Yeah.
be it. And this kind of brings me to another question that I want to give an opportunity for you to address, because a lot of people are listening to this and they're going, okay, so if this is real, if people are really curing themselves from all of these things, like if there's all this evidence and research, why isn't this more of a thing? Like, why am I hearing about this for the first time? And I would just share, for those of you that, for many people who've had the courage to kind of really look into this stuff, have learned that there's just been a lot of stuff that's been suppressed. That's just the reality of the situation. And it seems like that's changing. And it's a hard truth for many to face.
Yeah, because we have to be our own researchers. You only get one body this life, and everybody's been programmed, literally programmed, better do what the doctor says or you'll die. He's essentially bottom line. Better do what the doctor says. But, we have to be our own doctors, really. We have to do our own research. You only get one body. This is our greatest investment, is in our own health. If you don't have your health, what do you have? What are you going to give your kids? You know?
Truth. And so, what would you respond to kind of like, why is this not more of a thing? And then, how do you ensure in the future that the E system remains, it can fulfill its vision?
Well, we've made it this far. there's there's more than, well, it was up to 700 centers in 60 countries. So it will not be stopped. It's to that point. It had to go out so fast, so far, so fast that it couldn't be stopped. And we're at that. And it's like earth acupuncture. We're working with how do we heal a planet, and it's creating healthy communities because of the way it creates a null zone that goes out from the centers or from the individual homes. Because initially it was in private homes all over the world, more than centers, and now it's both. I mean, we've got both, and it's all over the world, like 60 some countries. Uh, so at this point, I mean, the pharmaceutical industry has been more than 80% of the advertising dollar, and it's been a control, they made it illegal to heal, fix, or cure anything. So it made it illegal to even talk about what the technology was really doing. So it's all been word of mouth. And now, Bobby Kennedy, we've supported him wholeheartedly. Make America Healthy Again. Del Bigtree, he just got the award for at a conference that I was. Let's see, in Dallas, we had a big conference called Changing Life and Destiny. Last year, I was named Person of the Year. This year, Del Bigtree was named for the most successful campaign of the year, because as far as in changes in bringing healthcare to the world, because he was Bobby Kennedy's, he was the head of his campaign, Del Bigtree. And he's done a lot to bring the vaccine damage out. He did the film Vaxxed, Vaxxed. But even so, even he's going, God, this is the worst attacks I've had of my entire life now, because we're in the crucible, we're in the crux of it. And we're getting the attacks. So, because we're on the front lines.
One of my friends runs one of the largest psychedelic medicine companies in the country, and he's had death threats. He's had to get literal FBI people to protect him, and it's really, people find this hard to believe, but like,
no, the attempts, the threats on our lives.
This is real stuff.
Yeah, it's real stuff. My friend Rashid Buttar, Dr. Rashid Buttar, was one of the ones hit with the bioweapon stuff. We were out there, the Arise Freedom Tour, but also, I was a commissioner on the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, doing all the research and bringing forward. We did 8 emergency hearings on the COVID, on the COVID pandemic. 8 emergency hearings on it, and I was commissioner on that court. So with Sasha Stone, but with Robert David Steele, who also was taken out, former CIA, and brought forward all the stuff of the child trafficking, because it's always been about the kids. And so that's the underpinning of stuff. And so all this is being brought forward, but we were, under direct attempts and threats on our lives, or, with some of the other events. I mean, every time we were hit with different bioweapons or, and I've had to have security and stuff as well. But I do want people to pray for divine intervention. I would not personally be here because they've tried to take me on many, many times. I'm in my 70s now. I'm still here. We're still standing. But we wouldn't be here without Archangel Michael. So I do want to acknowledge that. And we have access to legions of angelic forces. So pray for divine intervention. Know that these guardian angels can have your back. And say thank you and hallelujah.
Yeah. And just to kind of shift things back in a little bit more positive direction here, it's incredible what you've created. It's helped so many people, including myself, and the word is just getting out. And I think, with all this stuff, with all this human potential, anything in the consciousness realm, it's like, treat it as an experiment. Go try it. See if it works. Go find the answers for yourself.
Help, can't hurt, doesn't matter what. We have doctors that say, if you have DNA, get in it. And and it's like the animals are much easier than humans because they don't have all the mental masturbation. They're much easier. Children, animals, don't have to explain shift to them at all.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Sandra. This has been such a fun conversation, so educational. Funny enough, I'm going to an overnight tonight, so I'm going to take this good energy with me to that. And I just want to say thank you so much for everything. And for everybody listening, is eesystem.com the best place for them to go to check out where they might go and find a system to explore?
Yeah, EESystem.com. They can find the location nearest them. They can find a lot of stuff. But if you put in my name or put in EE System on YouTube, you'll probably find a whole lot more stuff. Yeah, they can visit the eesystem.com or they can do a search. There's lots of material out there. You also might find some of the attacks on me, but oh well. I am the real inventor of the EE system. We'll just leave it at that. And this has been,
Awesome.
I've been teaching more than 45 years. This is my life, it's my work.
Well, thank you again for all of your work and for this conversation. It's been really wonderful to just explore all of this with you. And for everyone listening, we'll make sure to link everything out that we mentioned so that you can go check it out for yourself. And I just want to say one last thank you, Dr. Sandra. This has been really fun.
Oh, thank you, Scott, for inviting me on and making this happen. I appreciate it because we do want to just get the word out to people. The only thing beyond love is more fully shared love. So now that you have the information, knowledge is power, information, now that you have the awarenesses, you have a responsibility or an accountability to share that. There isn't anybody on the planet that couldn't benefit by this technology. So let everybody know.
You heard it here. All righty. Thanks, everyone.